The cold wind off Highway 41 carried the smell of fuel, dust, and something far more unsettling, silence. Officer Caleb Rivers stepped out of his cruiser and scanned the abandoned rest stop with a sinking feeling he couldn't yet name. The place stood in the outskirts of rural Tennessee, a place parents drove past without stopping, a place travelers used only in emergencies, and a place police officers responded to only when something had gone terribly wrong. The call had come from an exhausted long-haul trucker who'd stopped here for a quick break. He hadn't seen anything unusual, no screams, no struggle. But as he walked past the dumpsters behind the rest stop, something pink and small caught his eye. He didn't touch it. He just called 911. And now Caleb saw it for himself. A tiny girl's shoe, pink, glittery, the kind little kids begged their parents for in stores. Caleb crouched beside it. It looked recently discarded, not weathered or wet. He lifted his radio. "Dispatch, I'm on scene, confirming child's shoe, no visual on the caller, area quiet, requesting." A sudden tug at his side interrupted him. Ember, his K-9 partner, strained against her lead, nose low, tail rigid, with that sharp, unwavering tension that meant one thing, danger or distress. Her brindled fur bristled along her spine as she sniffed deeper, her entire body language shouting urgency. "All right, girl," Caleb murmured, "show me." Ember pulled him past the main building, toward an older storage structure behind the rest stop. The place looked forgotten, rusted metal siding, half-broken floodlights, and weeds growing waist-high around the foundation. A faded maintenance-only sign hung sideways from a single remaining screw. Caleb felt a prickling along the back of his neck. Something was wrong here, very wrong. Ember growled, not loud but low and steady, the warning growl she used when she was certain. Her nose skimmed the dirt until she froze, paw lifting slightly, her stare locked on the back wall of the building. That's when Caleb saw it. A child's handprint. Small, smudged, pressed against the metal siding at knee height. Dirt streaked across it like someone wiped it halfway away in a hurry or was dragged. Caleb's heart hammered as he stepped closer. "Dispatch," he said slowly. "I've got signs of a minor on site, possible abduction. Send additional units." He didn't finish the sentence. Ember jerked her head toward a narrow gap at the back of the structure. A maintenance corridor, barely 2 feet wide, hidden behind overgrown weeds. The space disappeared into darkness. Ember lunged, pulling him toward it with sudden aggression. "Easy, easy, Ember." Caleb tried to steady her, but the dog wouldn't relent. Her ears were pinned, muscles taut, eyes sharp. She wasn't searching anymore. She was tracking. Caleb swallowed hard and lifted his flashlight. The beam swept across the narrow corridor. At the far end, he spotted something. A small stuffed bear. Its fur was a dingy brown, but one ear hung in tatters, and its side was smeared with dirt. Caleb recognized toys like this, cherished, carried everywhere, slept with every night. A child didn't abandon something like that willingly. Ember whined, a sound Caleb rarely heard. Not fear, not confusion, sympathy. She pressed her nose to the opening again, pushing forward as if she wished she could speak. "All right," Caleb whispered, "we're going in." He lowered himself onto his knees. The ground was cold and gritty beneath his hands. Ember slipped beside him, body tense but careful. They moved slowly through the corridor, the space barely wide enough for them to fit. Halfway in, Caleb paused. A faint sound echoed through the narrow walls. He froze. A whisper, or a breath, or something like a whimper. He held his own breath, listening. Silence. Then a soft, unmistakable sniffle. A child. Ember's ears shot forward. She barked once quietly but with purpose. Not alarm, recognition. Caleb's pulse surged. He moved faster now, low-crawling toward a small opening at the end of the corridor. The light from his flashlight reflected off rusted pipes beyond. It looked like an old service room. Then he saw movement, a small figure shifting in the far corner. A little girl, barely 6, knees pulled tightly to her chest, dirt streaking her cheeks, big, wide eyes staring at him, terrified yet hopeful. Caleb lowered his voice. "Hey there, you're okay. I'm Officer Rivers. We're going to get you out." She shook her head sharply, pressing a finger to her lips. Then something strange happened. She lifted her hand, tapped her knee twice, and pointed upward. A hand signal. Ember responded instantly, ears forward, body shifting into alert stance. "How do you?" Caleb started. But he didn't finish. Because above them, something heavy creaked. A footstep. Then another. Someone else was here. And they weren't alone. The ceiling dust drifted down in soft spirals as a shadow moved above them. And then, the sound of a metal latch unlocking echoed through the hidden room. Caleb's hand instinctively shifted toward his holster as the metallic click echoed overhead. Ember pressed close, muscles coiled like a spring, eyes fixed on the ceiling. The little girl grabbed Caleb's sleeve with surprising strength for someone so small. Her breath hitched, not quite a sob, but the tight, silent gasp of a child who had been scared for far too long. "SHH," Caleb whispered, placing a steady hand over hers. "You're safe, I'm right here." But her head shook violently. No, no, no. Her eyes darted upward again. Whoever was above them wasn't leaving. They were coming. The old service room was cramped, rusted pipes, broken tiles, and tools abandoned decades ago. The ventilation shafts along the wall hummed faintly with the distant vibration of highway traffic. It felt like a tomb. And someone was about to drop into it. Caleb flicked off his flashlight, plunging the room into near darkness except for a sliver of ambient light leaking through a rusted vent. Ember's silhouette was rigid, poised to protect. The girl moved suddenly, tugging his sleeve again. She pointed toward the far wall, to a narrow ventilation shaft just big enough for the dog. She tapped her knee twice, then pointed to the shaft, using the same K9 hand signal pattern from before. Caleb frowned at her. "You want Ember to go in there." Another urgent nod. How did she know these signals? Who taught her? He didn't have time to ask. The footsteps above grew louder, shifting from testing weight to deliberate climbing. Whoever it was knew how to move quietly, but not quietly enough for Ember. The dog's ears pinned backward, sensing threat. Caleb leaned toward the dog. "Ember, vent, go." She slipped into the shaft with silent precision, her nails barely clicking against the metal. Her dark shape vanished into the narrow tunnel, and the girl let out a shaky breath of relief. Caleb turned back toward the ladder hatch above. He crouched low, positioning his body between the girl and danger. He lifted his radio slowly. "Dispatch," he whispered, keeping his voice low. "Suspected kidnapper on site. Send SWAT. Immediate." Before he could finish, his signal cut out, replaced by static. The metal above screeched open. Caleb's pulse thudded in his ears. A faint cone of light spilled into the room as the hatch swung back. Dust drifted like snow, and a silhouette leaned over the opening. Heavy boots appeared, then a knee, then the full crouched form of a man lowering himself down the ladder. He moved with deliberate slowness, like someone confident enough not to rush. His jacket was dark, stained, his hands gloved, his face partly hidden by the shadow of a tattered baseball cap. The girl jerked backward, nearly tripping over a pipe. Caleb reached behind him and steadied her without looking. The man stopped halfway down the ladder. He didn't speak. He didn't rush. He was listening. Caleb felt the man's silence like a pressure in the air. Then the stranger finally spoke, his voice low and oily. "I figured you'd find her." Caleb's jaw locked. "You're not taking another step." The man chuckled, a cold, chilling sound. "Oh, officer, you think I came alone?" Caleb stiffened. Ember barked faintly somewhere deep in the ventilation system, as if reacting to something or someone else. The girl shook harder now, pressing herself against Caleb's back. Her mouth formed a single word. Two. Two of them. The man reached toward his jacket slowly. "Stop," Caleb ordered, weapon rising smoothly. "Hands where I can see them." But the man didn't freeze. He smiled. "Or what?" he whispered. Caleb shifted his stance, ready to fire if he needed to. But he also needed to protect the child behind him. One wrong move and... Suddenly, a loud metallic crash erupted from somewhere inside the building. Something, or someone, had knocked over a heavy object upstairs. The man flinched, momentarily startled. Ember. She was causing a diversion. Caleb seized the opening and bolted forward, grabbing the man's arm before he reached whatever was in his jacket. They slammed into the ladder, rattling it violently. The man fought back with surprising strength, elbowing Caleb in the ribs. Caleb grunted as the air punched out of him. The man reached into his pocket again. No gunshot rang out. But something glinted. A knife. Keys. A weapon. Caleb grabbed the man's wrist, struggling to keep it pinned against the ladder. But the stranger grinned through his teeth. "Too late, officer." And then, from the ventilation tunnel behind them, Ember let out a sound Caleb had never heard from her before. A deep, guttural warning growl. Not aimed at the man he was fighting. At something else. Something moving inside the tunnel. Something getting closer. Caleb barely had time to react before Ember erupted from the vent like a shadow, landing between him and the man with a low, fierce growl. The little girl's wide eyes were fixed on the dog, awe and terror warring in her gaze. Caleb could feel the weight of the moment. One misstep, one sudden move, and the situation could spiral out of control. Ember's eyes were locked on the kidnapper, teeth bared, growling in a rhythm almost deliberate. Caleb froze, realizing the dog wasn't reacting randomly. She was responding to signals, signals the girl had been giving. The girl, still clutching Caleb's sleeve, lifted her tiny hand again. 2 taps on her knee just like before, then a slow point toward the far corner of the service room. Caleb's gaze followed her finger. There it was, a narrow crawlspace, partially hidden behind rusted pipes and an old metal toolbox. Not big enough for him, but Ember could slip through. Caleb's heart pounded. He wasn't sure if the girl knew how to communicate with a K-9, or if she had learned the language instinctively during days of captivity, but the results were undeniable. He whispered, "Ember, that's your path, go." The dog hesitated just a moment, then bolted into the narrow crawlspace, low to the ground, perfectly silent. Caleb could hear the scrape of her paws against the metal floor, the tunnel swallowing the sound instantly. He looked back at the girl. Her lips trembled, but she mouthed one word, "Wait." Caleb nodded, "I'll be right here." The man above them, still crouched halfway down the ladder, shifted impatiently. "Why are you wasting time with a dog? She's just a kid. You can't save her without me knowing it." Caleb's jaw tightened. "You underestimate her. You underestimate us." The man stepped fully into the room, boot heels clanking on the cold concrete floor. He reached inside his jacket, producing something metallic. Caleb's gut twisted. A knife. The little girl's fingers flew to her mouth again. Ember growled from the crawlspace, the sound low and warning, almost like she was counting the seconds before an attack. Caleb made a split-second decision. He grabbed the man's wrist just as he lunged toward the girl. A metallic clang rang out, the knife struck a pipe and spun away. The man cursed, swinging his other fist, but Caleb's grip was strong. He shoved him back toward the ladder, forcing him to stagger. Ember's growl intensified. From the shadowed crawlspace came a faint movement. Caleb realized there was something or someone else in that tunnel. He glanced toward the girl. Her hands were shaking now. "They're coming," she whispered. Caleb's heart skipped. "Who? How many?" She pointed again, trembling, toward the vent. Then her finger traced a path upward toward the ceiling. Caleb's eyes widened. She wasn't talking about the man in front of him. She was warning him about whoever or whatever was above. The footsteps resumed, deliberate and measured. Someone was descending toward them, careful but confident. Caleb could feel the tension in the air, the danger coiling like a spring above his head. He didn't know if it was another kidnapper or something even worse. The man in front of him noticed Caleb's gaze shift and smirked. "You're scared now, officer. You're finally realizing this isn't just me." Caleb gritted his teeth. He had to protect the girl. He had to survive. But he knew the vent would be the difference between life and death. Ember wasn't just a dog. She was a trained partner, and right now, she was their only chance to gain control. He heard a scraping sound, a metal piece sliding against concrete, and then a sudden thump above. Caleb froze. The ladder rattled. Dust spiraled down like snowflakes. Ember barked sharply. The little girl grabbed Caleb's jacket, eyes wide, panic brimming. "She's here," the girl whispered, voice barely audible. Caleb's blood ran cold. The thought that they were dealing with more than one person, someone who knew the layout, someone patient, deliberate, was almost too much to bear. His grip on the kidnapper's wrist tightened. The footsteps above moved closer. Caleb realized they had seconds, not minutes. The ceiling hatch creaked, then shifted. Dust fell in thick, choking clouds. Ember growled again, low and menacing. Then, as if responding to an unspoken command, the little girl raised a trembling hand one last time. 2 sharp taps on her knee, then a single pointed gesture toward Caleb. It was a signal. A warning. And just as Caleb braced himself for whatever would drop through that hatch, the air itself seemed to thrum with tension. Something heavy landed on the floor above them. Not just a footstep, something heavier, something that didn't belong. Caleb froze. Ember's growl turned into a low snarl, hackles raised. The little girl buried her face against Caleb's shoulder, trembling. And then silence. A silence so thick it pressed against Caleb's chest, suffocating, promising that the next moment would change everything. From above, a shadow shifted. And Caleb knew instinctively, the danger wasn't over, not by a long shot. The silence pressed down like a physical weight, broken only by Ember's low, rumbling growl and the girl's shallow breaths against Caleb's shoulder. Caleb's eyes never left the ceiling hatch. Dust drifted lazily to the floor, glittering in the weak flashlight beam, making the room feel unreal, like a nightmare rendered in pale metal and shadows. The little girl tugged at his sleeve again, her small fingers curling around his jacket. She shook her head violently, lips trembling, then pointed again, toward the narrow ventilation shaft that had swallowed Ember. Caleb understood immediately. Ember wasn't just a diversion. She was the girl's signal, her secret weapon. He exhaled slowly. "Stay calm, okay? You're doing everything right. Ember's got this." The girl gave him a fleeting nod, though her eyes never left the hatch. Caleb crouched slightly, bringing himself to her level. "Whatever happens, we get through this together." A creaking sound cut through the thick air. Someone, or something, was descending. Caleb's pulse hammered, adrenaline flooding his veins. The man he'd already pinned to the ladder made a low growl of frustration and tried to wrench free, but Caleb's grip was iron-tight. Above, the hatch shifted again. Dust rained down in tiny clouds, coating the floor. Then a shadow dropped through the opening, slamming onto the concrete floor with a heavy thud that made Caleb's ears ring. He raised his weapon, heart hammering. The shadow rolled and came upright. Caleb's flashlight flicked across it, revealing a figure cloaked in dark clothing, mask covering half of the face. Tall, broad, deliberate. The kind of person who carried calm like armor. Caleb realized instantly, they weren't just dealing with a single kidnapper anymore. The girl had been right. "She knows him," the girl whispered, voice tight, trembling. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Who knows who? The figure above didn't answer. Instead, they moved with slow precision, scanning the room. Ember lunged, teeth bared, fur bristling. The dog's low growl filled the room, vibrating in the metal pipes, warning the intruder. The man Caleb had pinned twisted, shouting, "Stop her, she can't." Ember's growl cut him off. The dog lunged again, snapping at the man's legs, forcing him to stumble back. Caleb grabbed the opportunity and shoved him into a corner, cuffing him with practiced efficiency. But Caleb knew it wasn't over, not even close. The girl's trembling hand pointed again, toward the far corner of the room. Caleb followed her gaze. Another vent, another path. She was guiding him, not just with signals but with knowledge of the layout, knowledge only someone who had been trapped there could have. "She's going to help us," Caleb muttered under his breath. Suddenly, a scraping sound above. The masked figure was moving again, descending closer to them. Caleb pressed back, shielding the girl. Ember circled, eyes locked on the new threat. The tension in the air was electric, every nerve screaming danger. The girl whispered again, one word, "Hurry." Caleb's stomach twisted. Hurry? Hurry for what? To escape, to fight, to survive. He didn't have time to ask. He had to trust her instinct and Ember. The masked figure's boots hit the floor. Caleb flicked the flashlight toward them. The beam caught the glint of something metallic in their hand, a weapon of some kind. Knife? Crowbar? He couldn't tell. All he knew was the figure's intent, controlled, precise, deadly. The girl's hands flew to her mouth, but her eyes remained fixed on the intruder. Then she tapped her knee twice. Caleb realized it was the same pattern, the K9 signal she had used before. 2 taps. A point. Ember recognized it immediately. The dog lunged, teeth aimed at the intruder's arm. The masked figure dodged just in time, but the distraction bought Caleb enough time to push the girl behind a row of abandoned crates. Dust exploded into the air as he braced himself, weapon raised, muscles coiled. "Get out of here," Caleb yelled, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Go now." The girl hesitated for just a second, then crawled low, following the vent that led into a side tunnel. Ember barked twice, a warning, then followed, disappearing into the metal shaft with lethal precision. Caleb turned back to the masked intruder. They advanced cautiously, weapon raised. Caleb's heart raced. He could feel the weight of every second, the stakes impossibly high. One wrong move and the little girl, Ember, or he himself could be lost forever. The intruder's shadow stretched across the floor, moving closer. Caleb's pulse thudded. He tightened his grip on his weapon. And then suddenly, the intruder stopped. Something in the vent clattered, something heavy, a muffled sound almost like a growl echoing in the metal tunnel. Caleb's stomach dropped. Ember was back, but she wasn't alone. The little girl's voice trembled through the vent. "He's not alone." Caleb froze, his breath caught. Someone else. Another threat, and this time they didn't know where it would come from. The intruder advanced one step. Caleb raised his weapon. And everything went silent. A silence so thick, so unbearable, Caleb realized the worst was yet to come. Caleb's muscles tensed, weapon leveled, eyes locked on the masked intruder inching toward him. Every second stretched like steel wire, every heartbeat amplified in his ears. Dust swirled in the stale air of the abandoned service room, carrying the faint scent of rust, oil, and something more sinister, fear. The little girl huddled behind the crates, tiny shoulders shaking, gripping the edge of the wood like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to safety. "Stay behind me," Caleb whispered, keeping his voice steady, even as adrenaline slammed through his veins. Ember's low growl echoed from somewhere in the vent system, the dog's eyes gleaming like coals in the shadows. Caleb had trained with Ember for years, but even he hadn't expected this. A kidnapper so ruthless, so precise, that every move had to be calculated, or the child wouldn't make it out alive. The masked figure paused, assessing the room, weapon glinting faintly in the flashlight beam. "You think you've got control," the intruder sneered, voice low and mocking. "There's more coming. You're too late." Caleb's stomach sank. "What do you mean more?" he demanded. But the intruder didn't answer. Instead, they moved with deliberate slowness, circling the room like a predator, boots echoing sharply against concrete. Caleb shifted slightly, keeping the girl between them, muscles coiled for the fight. Then came the sound, a faint metallic scrape from the vent, accompanied by a low growl. Ember was back. Caleb's heart surged. The dog wasn't alone. From the shadows of the vent, two dark shapes emerged, alert, agile, moving with a precision that made Caleb's pulse race. The girl's eyes widened. They're helping us," she whispered, voice shaking but resolute. Caleb barely had time to register her words before the masked intruder lunged forward, swinging a heavy crowbar with terrifying speed. Caleb dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the blow. The crowbar slammed into the wall with a deafening clang, sending sparks of rusted metal scattering. Ember barked and lunged, intercepting the intruder, teeth sinking into the wrist clutching the crowbar. The man yelped, staggering back, but kept his grip. Caleb seized the moment. He grabbed the intruder's arm, slamming him against a stack of crates. Wood splintered under the impact. "Stay down," Caleb shouted. The intruder struggled violently, but Caleb's training and adrenaline held him firm. The girl crawled closer, eyes fixed on Ember and the intruder. She picked up the fallen stuffed bear, clutching it like a talisman, her small frame trembling. Caleb glanced at her. "Good, stay low, stay quiet." The intruder's free hand flashed toward his jacket again, and Caleb saw it, something metallic. A knife. Caleb lunged, blocking the movement, but the intruder twisted violently. Pain shot up Caleb's arm as the knife grazed his shoulder. He gritted his teeth against the sting, refusing to falter. Ember's growl escalated, a low rumble vibrating through the room, warning the intruder that he had underestimated the dog, and now Caleb. Suddenly the little girl's voice rang out. "No, up there." Caleb turned just in time to see a second shadow descending from the ceiling hatch. Another kidnapper. Calm, calculated, wearing dark clothing, a mask hiding half the face, like a mirror of the first intruder. Caleb's stomach dropped. The girl had been right. He wasn't dealing with one attacker, he was facing a coordinated team. Ember reacted immediately, lunging toward the nearest threat, teeth bared, moving with terrifying precision. Caleb shoved the first intruder back into the corner and pivoted, weapon raised, facing the new threat. The two intruders froze for a heartbeat, reassessing the situation, but Caleb could see the confidence in their stance. They weren't amateurs. Caleb's shoulder burned, blood trickling down his arm, but he ignored it. There was no time for pain, only survival, only the girl. The little girl clutched the stuffed bear tighter, staring at the vent where Ember had just disappeared. Then she whispered something Caleb barely caught. "The other one, he's close." A sick feeling twisted in Caleb's gut. The danger wasn't just in front of them, it was everywhere, and it was closing in fast. The first intruder regained composure, lunging again with the crowbar while the second moved toward Caleb with silent menace. Caleb ducked, rolled, and fired a warning shot into the ceiling, sparks flying. Ember barked furiously from above, a signal, a warning, a promise. The little girl's hands flew to her mouth again, her eyes wide with fear, but also recognition. She knew Ember. She trusted Ember. Caleb realized then the girl wasn't just a victim. She was guiding them. She was part of the plan. The intruders froze for a second, registering the threat from the vents. Caleb seized the opening, tackling the nearest one into the floor. The second intruder advanced, slow, deliberate, weapon ready. Caleb blocked instinctively, locking eyes with the masked figure. "Too late," the second intruder hissed. Caleb gritted his teeth, heart racing, blood burning in his shoulder. But then from the shadows above, Ember reappeared, teeth flashing, growl like thunder, rushing toward the intruder. Time seemed to slow. The little girl's hand tapped twice on her knee, then pointed straight at the intruder. The warning was clear, and Caleb realized the fight had only just begun. Caleb's shoulder throbbed with every heartbeat, blood seeping through his uniform, but he didn't allow himself to flinch. Ember lunged with ferocious precision, teeth snapping at the second intruder, forcing him to stagger back. The first intruder, pinned beneath Caleb's weight, struggled violently, striking and kicking in desperation. Dust and debris filled the air, coating every surface, turning the dim service room into a haze of tension and chaos. The little girl huddled behind the crates clutched her bear like a shield. Her wide eyes flicked between Caleb and Ember, comprehension dawning that the dog wasn't just a partner, it was a lifeline. Her lips quivered, and she whispered the first words she'd spoken in hours. "Go now." Caleb's pulse pounded in his ears. "Ember, hold him," he barked. The dog's teeth clamped onto the intruder's jacket sleeve, forcing him to release the knife clutched in one hand. Sparks flew as metal scraped concrete. Caleb snatched it, tossing it out of reach. The intruder roared in frustration, trying to shake Ember off. Caleb tightened his grip on the pinned man, leveraging his weight against the first intruder. "Stay down now," he shouted, voice sharp, unyielding. But the danger wasn't over. From somewhere above, a metallic scrape echoed. Caleb's gut twisted. The ceiling hatch shifted again. Dust rained down in spirals as a shadow descended. A third threat, tall, deliberate, moving like a predator who had been waiting for the right moment. The girl's eyes widened in terror. She tapped her knee twice, Ember's signal, and pointed toward the intruder. Caleb understood immediately. Ember lunged again, meeting the new intruder halfway, snapping and growling with deadly precision. Caleb pivoted, blocking the intruder's swinging arm. Pain flared in his shoulder, but he gritted his teeth, refusing to falter. The intruder twisted, elbowing him hard in the ribs, sending him stumbling. Ember barked fiercely, a warning, and Caleb regained his footing just in time to block another strike. The little girl crawled forward, clutching her bear. "Watch him," she whispered, pointing toward the first intruder still pinned beneath Caleb. She was right. Even one freed attacker could turn everything catastrophic. Caleb shoved the intruder back, cuffing him with a swift motion. Ember barked again, circling the remaining intruder who lunged with a weapon, a crowbar, now glinting in the dim light. Caleb blocked, swinging the first intruder into the wall as the second swung the crowbar at him. He ducked just in time, hearing the heavy impact clang against the concrete. "Stop," Caleb shouted, voice cutting through the haze. "Stop, you're done." The intruder hesitated for a fraction of a second. Enough. Ember darted, teeth clamping onto his wrist. He screamed, stumbling backward. Caleb lunged, forcing him to the floor, pinning him with all his strength. Sweat and blood mixed on his skin, adrenaline surging through every nerve. The little girl hugged the stuffed bear to her chest, watching intently. Caleb could see understanding in her eyes. The fight wasn't over, but she was part of it. She had helped them survive this long. The masked intruder above froze, assessing the chaos below. Caleb realized something chilling. The girl knew them. She had trained with Ember. She understood signals, patterns, and tactics. Somehow, this child had prepared them for this exact moment without speaking a word. Caleb's weapon remained trained on the descending intruder. He could feel the tension coil in the air like a living thing. One wrong move and it would all collapse. He glanced at the girl, who whispered, He's not alone either." Caleb's stomach dropped. Another threat. Ember growled low in response, hackles raised. The intruder above shifted, descending with deliberate slowness. Caleb realized this was more than a confrontation. It was a trap. Sweat burned his eyes. His shoulder throbbed. Pain radiated from his ribs, but he couldn't stop. Not now. Not with the girl and Ember depending on him. The first intruder struggled beneath Caleb. The second remained pinned by Ember's jaws. The third, above, descended with caution, weapon raised, scanning. Caleb's mind raced. He had to protect the girl, neutralize the threats, and survive. Then just as the intruder's shadow crossed the floor, something shifted in the vent behind Caleb. Ember barked sharply this time, then froze. Caleb turned, realizing the dog had detected something approaching from the darkness, moving silently, unseen. The little girl's voice trembled, whispering, "The other one." Caleb froze. Ember's growl deepened. Every instinct screamed danger. Another presence, another threat closing in fast. And Caleb understood the terrifying truth. The fight wasn't over, not even close. Someone or something was coming. And they were closer than he had ever imagined. Caleb's muscles burned, shoulder throbbing, ribs aching, but his focus never wavered. Ember crouched low, teeth bared, ears pricked, circling the intruder descending from the ceiling. The first two attackers were pinned, one under Caleb's weight, the other clamped in Ember's jaws, but the third remained a calculated threat, moving deliberately, weapon raised, eyes scanning the chaos below. The little girl pressed against Caleb, clutching her stuffed bear, wide-eyed, trembling, but unafraid. She had already guided them through impossible odds with her signals, and now her small hands flew to her mouth, her whispers barely audible. He knows her. Caleb's mind raced. Knows her. The intruder's gaze flickered as if recognizing something or someone in the girl. The blood drained from Caleb's face. Somehow the girl wasn't just a victim, she was central to this nightmare. The intruder's boots hit the floor fully, the metallic scrape echoing in the abandoned room. Caleb's pulse spiked. Ember growled, low and resonant, warning the intruder that the dog's loyalty and lethal precision was unshakable. Then the girl tapped her knee twice, the K9 signal pattern she had used from the beginning, then pointed directly at the intruder. Ember barked sharply and lunged. The intruder dodged but was forced to stagger backward, giving Caleb the opening he needed. "Get down," Caleb shouted. He pushed the girl behind a row of rusted crates, weapon raised, eyes locked on the third intruder. The first two were still restrained, but Caleb knew it wouldn't take long for them to recover if he hesitated. The intruder circled slowly, watching Caleb and the girl, calculating. "You think a dog and a little girl can stop me?" the masked figure sneered. "You have no idea what's coming." Caleb swallowed hard. His mind raced. There had to be a strategy. There had to be a way to survive this escalating nightmare. He glanced at the girl, whose eyes were glued to Ember and the intruder. She tapped her knee again, urgent, commanding. Caleb realized she wasn't just signaling Ember, she was signaling him. The girl's trembling voice cut through the chaos. "The other one." Caleb froze. Another threat. How many more were involved? His blood ran cold. The first intruder squirmed beneath him, grunting, while Ember held the second intruder at bay. The room felt impossibly small, every corner hiding danger, every shadow a potential attack. The ceiling hatch shifted again. Caleb's heart skipped. Dust spiraled down as the fourth intruder, or perhaps the same unseen threat, slid partially through the opening. Ember's growl intensified, sharp and warning. The girl's tiny hand shot up again, 2 taps, then a point toward the vent. Caleb realized with a jolt that the girl had been reading the situation, anticipating danger before it even appeared. She knew this hidden entrance. She knew the intruder's movements. Somehow, she had survived this long because she understood them better than anyone in the room. The new figure dropped fully into the service room, boots hitting the floor with terrifying precision. Caleb tensed, weapon raised, muscles coiled, ready to strike. Ember lunged immediately, teeth flashing, growl rumbling like distant thunder. The first intruder beneath Caleb made a sudden move to free himself, but Ember snapped her jaws, forcing him back down. The masked figure moved with alarming speed, swinging a crowbar toward Caleb. He ducked, rolling to the side, and fired a warning shot into the ceiling. Sparks flew. The sound echoed, but it bought him a split second. Ember barked and lunged again, keeping the intruder off balance. Caleb seized the opportunity. He lunged, pinning the masked figure against the wall. The intruder struggled, weapon flailing, but Caleb's grip was iron. Sweat ran down his forehead, mixing with the sting of blood from his shoulder. His ribs ached, every nerve screaming. "Stay down," Caleb barked. "You're done." The intruder's eyes flicked to the girl, narrowing. Caleb's stomach sank. The girl's signals, her knowledge, her courage, they were more than guidance. They were a lifeline, a key to survival, and the intruder knew it. The girl whispered again, voice trembling, "He knows me." Caleb froze. Ember growled, hackles raised. The intruder above shifted, moving closer, recognition in their eyes. Caleb's heart pounded. Something in the girl's past, something she hadn't spoken, was the reason for this nightmare. Time slowed. The room held its breath. Caleb, Ember, and the little girl faced the intruders, every nerve screaming danger, every second stretching impossibly long. The next move would decide life or death. And then the girl tapped her knee twice, one final time, pointing directly at the masked figure descending from the ceiling, her eyes wide and resolute. It was the signal Caleb had been waiting for. And he knew instinctively. The final confrontation was about to begin. Caleb's pulse hammered as he readied himself for the final confrontation. Ember crouched low, teeth bared, eyes blazing with loyalty and precision. The little girl clutched her stuffed bear, trembling, yet her gaze never wavered from the masked intruder descending from the ceiling hatch. 2 taps on her knee. Ember recognized the signal immediately, and a pointed gesture. Caleb understood. It was time. The masked figure froze, eyes locking onto the girl. Recognition flashed across the intruder's face, a mix of anger, shock, and something far darker, fear. Caleb's stomach dropped. This wasn't just a random kidnapper. He was someone who knew the girl, knew her intimately. "Stay behind me," Caleb whispered, though his voice was steadier than he felt. The intruder lunged with sudden violence, crowbar swinging in a deadly arc. Caleb pivoted, narrowly avoiding the strike. Ember lunged at the intruder's legs, teeth snapping, forcing him off balance. The little girl pressed herself against the crates, eyes wide, holding her bear like a shield. "Get away from her," Caleb shouted, tackling the intruder toward the floor. Sparks flew as the crowbar struck the concrete, clanging like a warning bell. The masked figure thrashed, trying to free himself, but Caleb's grip was relentless. Ember circled, growling, every movement calculated, a silent partner in the high-stakes dance of survival. Then the intruder's mask shifted, sliding slightly, revealing part of his face. Caleb froze. Recognition shot through him like a lightning bolt. The girl gasped, clutching her bear tighter. "You," she whispered, voice trembling. "It was you." Caleb realized the horrifying truth. This wasn't just an attack. This was personal. The intruder was someone from the girl's past, someone who had exploited her trust, who had kidnapped her before. His heart sank. Every instinct screamed to protect her, yet the realization added a layer of complexity he hadn't anticipated. The intruder roared in fury, attempting to rise, but Caleb held him down, weapon ready. Ember barked sharply, snapping her jaws at his hands. The struggle was fierce, every second a battle for life. Dust and debris swirled in the air, coating the room in gray haze. The girl's small voice cut through the chaos, trembling but commanding. "Ember now." The dog responded instantly, lunging with incredible speed at the intruder's exposed side. Teeth sank into his arm, forcing him to release the crowbar. Caleb seized it and tossed it far across the room. He could see the intruder's desperation mounting. "Stay down, you're finished," Caleb shouted, voice echoing through the service room. The intruder, realizing he was outmatched, made one final desperate move. He twisted, trying to grab Caleb's shoulder, but the little girl acted. With a courage born of survival, she pressed herself forward, tapping her knee twice and pointing straight at the intruder. Ember growled, understanding the signal perfectly. The dog lunged again, forcing the intruder to stumble back, pinned by Caleb and Ember. Time seemed suspended. The room was a battlefield of dust, sweat, and adrenaline. Caleb could see the fear etched on the intruder's face as he finally realized he was cornered. Backup sirens screamed in the distance. Caleb glanced toward the vents. Through the swirling dust, he saw two more figures, the intruder's accomplices, freeze, watching, realizing the plan had failed. Their chance had slipped through their fingers, lost to the coordination of a child, a dog, and a determined officer. The little girl finally stepped out from behind the crates, clutching her bear, trembling but steady. She looked at Caleb. He can't hurt anyone else," she whispered. Her voice, small but resolute, carried the weight of survival and courage beyond her years. Caleb nodded, his own relief mingled with exhaustion. "You were amazing," he said softly. "All of this, you knew exactly what to do." The intruder groaned beneath him, pinned and defeated. Caleb cuffed him, Ember's teeth still showing as a warning. The little girl's eyes flicked to the remaining shadows. The accomplices were gone, retreating into the darkness, but Caleb knew the immediate danger had passed. Emergency lights flashed as backup arrived, police pouring into the abandoned service room. Caleb guided the little girl into the arms of paramedics, who checked her over quickly. She hugged Ember's head, tears streaking her dirt-smudged cheeks. Caleb felt a swell of emotion, relief, pride, and awe at the courage of this tiny survivor. One of the officers approached Caleb, shaking his head. "I've never seen anything like this. That girl, she saved herself, and you." Caleb looked at her, kneeling to meet her gaze. "You're the hero here," he said gently. She blinked, swallowing hard, finally allowing herself a small, exhausted smile. Ember barked softly, nudging the girl with her nose. She laughed, a shaky, heartfelt sound, the first real laugh in hours. Caleb exhaled, finally letting the tension drain from his body. The nightmare was over. Or so it seemed. Because Caleb knew, somewhere out there, the other accomplices were still out in the night. But for now, the little girl was safe. Ember was loyal, and against impossible odds, courage and instinct had triumphed. The girl whispered once more, almost to herself, "We did it." Caleb looked around the dim room, the shadows, the broken tiles, the echoes of struggle, and felt a surge of gratitude. Survival, courage, and a bond between a girl and a dog had turned the tide. And in that moment, the world outside the abandoned rest stop seemed impossibly brighter than it had an hour before. But the memory of fear, of what could have happened, would never leave him. It was over for now.